Imagine this. You're driving home through thick fog, the world around you silent and suffocating. As you pass an old building you once knew as a library, something pulls you in. You enter, and the card catalog is alive, its drawers creaking open with names you recognize. Some of them are yours. Then, imagine your brother returns from a hike, acting strange. His smile is too wide, his eyes empty. He hums a lullaby, but the melody is wrong. The next day, you find a dead bird on the porch, neatly laid out like an offering. Something is wrong. Something is watching you, and once you start looking, your story is no longer your own. Hello everyone, I'm Dusky Nights, and I bring you real-life horror stories that will help you fall asleep. But before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It was supposed to be a simple 2-day trip. My brother, Rob, had gone off into the mountains, just like he always did when he needed space. He'd tell me it was for clarity, that he needed to clear his head, but I never asked for more details. Hiking was his thing, and I respected it. He'd been on this kind of trip before, always solo, and I didn't think twice when he left. But something was different this time. Something I couldn't place. 2 days later, he came back. But it wasn't really him. It started with the way he walked in. The door creaked open, and I looked up from my half-eaten dinner. "No, I'm back." Or, "How have you been?" Just the sound of his boots dragging slightly as he stepped into the house. He set his backpack down on the floor like it didn't belong to him, and then he stood there in the kitchen, eyes vacant, staring at nothing. I stared at him for a long second. "Good trip?" I asked, trying to sound casual, trying to ease the awkwardness creeping up my spine. He smiled at me, but there was something wrong with it. It didn't reach his eyes. His lips stretched wide in a grin, but it was hollow, like a mask he was trying to hold up. "Yeah, good trip," he replied, his voice almost too calm, too flat. His smile didn't drop once that night, not when he talked about the mountain lion tracks near his campsite, not when I noticed he was wearing my sweatshirt, the one he hated, the one he swore was too soft for hiking. But then there was something else, something that nagged at me the more we talked. When I asked him what trail he took, he answered, "North Ridge." The problem was, there is no North Ridge anywhere near here. I tried to shrug it off, to tell myself he was just confused or exhausted from the hike, but something in the back of my mind told me to keep my guard up. My brother never made mistakes like this. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like something was moving in the room with me, something unseen. I could hear the sound of his footsteps outside my bedroom door, slow and deliberate. But when I opened my eyes, there was nothing, not a sound, not a sign. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then, the humming started. I woke up around 2 in the morning to the faint, familiar tune. It was a lullaby my mom used to sing to me when I was a child. Something soft and sweet to calm me down when I was scared of the dark. But this time, the melody was off. The notes were crooked, wrong. The rhythm was all tangled up, like someone who had forgotten the song halfway through and tried to fill the gaps with something unfamiliar. I sat up, my heart racing, and peeked out of my bedroom door. Rob was standing in the hallway. His back was turned to me, his head tilted slightly as if he was listening to something just out of reach. I felt my breath hitch, but I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I was frozen, paralyzed by the wrongness of it. He didn't even notice I was awake, standing there, still humming the twisted lullaby, his body motionless, except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. I asked him the next morning about it. He just smiled, that same wide smile, and said, "What do you mean? I wasn't singing." His tone was calm, almost too calm, as if there was no reason to question it, as if nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. The next few days were a blur of strange occurrences. I tried to go about my life, hoping it was just exhaustion or some weird mix of stress and lack of sleep. But the weirdness didn't stop. It only grew worse. The dead bird on the porch was the first real sign that something wasn't right. It wasn't torn apart like an animal had killed it. It wasn't bloodied or mangled. No, it was just there, neatly arranged, like someone had placed it there as a gift. I asked Rob if he had put it there. He said no, his eyes vacant as he shrugged. Then, without missing a beat, he asked me if I remembered when our mom died. The thing was, our mom wasn't dead. She was alive and well, and I had just talked to her a few days ago. Something was happening to Rob, something I didn't understand. I waited until he went outside to feel the sun. Another weird thing, because Rob never cared about being outside unless it was for a hike. But he just stood there in the yard, arms hanging at his sides, face tilted toward the sky, like he was searching for something in the clouds. I waited until he was out of sight before I went to his pack. I knew I shouldn't have, but I couldn't resist. At first, everything seemed normal. His trail snacks, his water bottle, his knife. But when I unzipped the bottom pouch, that's when I found it. A lock of hair tied with red thread. It wasn't his hair, it wasn't mine. It was brittle, dry, and dark, like it had been preserved for years. It had the kind of feel to it that made your skin crawl. Beneath it, I found a scrap of parchment, yellowed with age, the paper rough beneath my fingertips. The charcoal drawings on it were jarring. It wasn't art. It was frantic, rough. Jagged lines layered in circles, stick figures warped around something in the center, something wrong. I didn't recognize the symbol at first, but as I stared at it, I started to feel like I should, like it was something familiar, something I had seen before in a dream, or perhaps in a nightmare, I turned the paper over. The word return was scrawled across the back in tiny, shaky handwriting. I barely had time to zip the pack back up before I heard the back door creak open. Rob stepped inside, his eyes still fixed on the ceiling. He didn't even look at me as he asked, "Been in my bag?" My heart stopped. I lied. "No." He smiled again, that same too wide smile. It didn't drop, not even when he poured himself a glass of water and drank it too fast. His throat made no noise as he swallowed, no sound at all. Later that night, I woke to the sound of humming again, but this time, it wasn't just the song that had changed, it was the words. They didn't rhyme anymore. They didn't make sense. I peeked out from my bedroom, my pulse racing in my chest. There he was again, standing in the hallway, back to me, not moving, just listening. I asked him what he was doing, but he didn't answer. He just turned and walked away. The next morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table. No coffee, no breakfast, just staring blankly at the table. When I walked in, he looked up at me with that same frozen smile. "Why'd you lie, little brother?" he asked, his voice smooth, calm. But there was a hint of something beneath it, something cold. I couldn't answer. I stood there, frozen, heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea how long he'd known, how long he'd been watching me, how much he understood. But I knew one thing: it wasn't my brother anymore. That afternoon, Rob left again. No word, no jacket, just a slow walk into the tree line, disappearing into the mist like he always did when he hiked. This time, I didn't check the pack. I waited. It was past midnight when he came back. His clothes were torn, his hands covered in dirt, like he had been buried in the earth and pulled back out again. His shirt was in tatters, his skin pale and stretched over his limbs like something that no longer fit right. But there was no blood, no injury, just wrong. He didn't speak, just walked past me, his eyes still fixed on some point beyond me, as if he wasn't really seeing me. He went straight to the basement, and that's when I heard it. The knocking. Not from the door. It was from the pack. Slow, wet, rhythmic, the sound of knuckles dragging against plastic. I opened it. The hair was still there, matted, wet with something dark, and beneath it, something wrapped in tattered cloth. I should have stopped. I should have left it alone, but I didn't. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a jar, sealed with wax and twine. Inside the jar was something wrong. A mouth. Not a full face, just a mouth. Lips stretched wide in a frozen scream, gums torn back, the lips sewn closed with sinew, and the worst part, it was breathing. The glass fogged every few seconds, like the thing inside was trying to speak. I looked at it too long. Then I realized it looked like mine. I dropped the jar. It didn't break. It just rolled across the floor, vibrating softly. From the basement, his voice called up. But it wasn't his voice. It was mine. Why'd you go through my things, little brother?" I couldn't move. The jar was still smiling. There's a building in my hometown that no one talks about anymore. It wasn't always this way. I remember a time when the faded pamphlets, stained and curling with age, were still taped to telephone poles around town. They spoke of community restoration and bringing the past into the future, or something equally vague and promising. But the signs stopped appearing. People forgot. Or maybe they just didn't want to remember. I ended up back in town because my aunt died. She lived on the outskirts of the neighborhood in a house that always smelled like dust, even when it was raining. I came to pack up her things, maybe flip the house or rent it out. I never got that far. Her will was strange, not in the dramatic sense, just off. The language didn't feel quite right. It was as though someone tried to sound formal, but didn't quite understand the formality they were trying to mimic. But the last line, that was what stuck. "Do not go to the library." That was it. No further explanation, just that sentence, typed cleanly, sharply, as though it had been added at the last minute and had been intended to stand out. But here's the thing. We don't have a library anymore. Not since the town decided to build a new community center across from the old city records office. The building was still there, though, tucked behind that crumbling office building, across from what used to be a dentist's office, with windows so fogged over they might as well have been permanent. But nobody calls it a library anymore. No one even calls it anything, except for me. I called it what it was. I called it what I remembered, and I should have left it alone. If you grew up where I did, you probably remember the old card catalog, the real one, the one with the wooden drawers, brass handles, and the fading plastic labels on each one. You'd pull out a drawer, and the wood would creak and groan, swollen with years of humidity. The smell of old glue and mold would rise up to greet you. The cards, so thick with age, would feel sticky under your fingers, and after a while, you'd swear the drawers were breathing. That's the memory that came flooding back when I walked past the building for the first time in years. The sidewalk was cracked, and some of the bricks from the library's exterior had fallen, left to rot in the dirt. The front doors were chained shut, but there was something about the chains that unsettled me. They weren't old. They weren't rusted. No, these chains were new, clean, tight, as though whoever had put them there wasn't trying to keep people out. They were keeping something in. I circled around to the back, my heart beginning to pound in my chest. There was the basement entrance, just like I remembered it. When I was a kid, I used to sneak into the basement with a flashlight and a bottle of soda I wasn't supposed to have. The lock was gone. Not broken, just gone, as though someone had taken it off neatly and left no trace behind. The air smelled the same, old paper, wet stone. But there was something else underneath. Something I didn't remember, but recognized anyway. A metallic rot like rust, but rust that had a temperature. I only took 3 steps into the basement before I saw it, the card catalog. It shouldn't have been there. The basement wasn't where they kept it. It used to sit proudly near the front, right past the information desk, on display. But here it was, shoved into the center of the cold concrete floor, as if someone had dragged it there in a hurry. I don't know what possessed me to open a drawer. Maybe it was the smell, or the silence, or the way my aunt's last words echoed in my mind like static. I pulled open the second drawer from the top. There was only 1 card inside. It had my name on it. Not just my name. It also had my address, my date of birth, the name of my ex, who moved away last spring, my blood type. I didn't even know my blood type until I saw it there, typed in red. All of it. I flipped the card over, and there were words written in a shaky, angular hand. Not typed, no. This was scribbled, scrawled in dark ink, as though written in a panic. You shouldn't be here. I dropped the card. My hand shook as I slammed the drawer shut. That should have been it. That should have been enough. I should have turned around and left. I should have packed my things, burned the house down, driven away as fast as I could. But I didn't, because as soon as I turned to leave, I heard it. A drawer opening, not behind me, not in front of me, all around me. I don't know how to explain it. The drawers, they weren't just drawers anymore. They were mouths, hollow little mouths, yawning open, one by one, in slow succession. The metal clacked, the wood creaked. It sounded like a song, played in a language I wasn't supposed to understand. And they weren't empty. Every drawer had a card. Every card had a name. And I recognized every single one of them. People I knew, people I'd forgotten, people I hadn't met yet. And the worst part, some of the cards were blank, just waiting. The drawer behind me slammed shut. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I just ran. I tripped on the stairs, my hands and knees scraping against the rough concrete. I didn't feel it until hours later, long after I was safe in my car, panting for breath. I didn't even realize the weight of the fog pressing in on me until I was back outside. The air felt wrong, heavier, like the pressure had shifted in the air around me while I was inside, like something had followed me out. I haven't been back since. Not inside, but sometimes at night, when I'm trying to sleep, I hear it. Drawers opening, just one at first, then another, and another, until it's all I can hear. That soft sliding wood, that boat click of metal, that breathing. I think it's reading me. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was just a dream, that it was all the stress of packing up my aunt's house, combined with the grief of losing her. I tried to tell myself it was nothing but a hallucination, a trick my mind played on me to make sense of all the strange things I was dealing with. But the scratch on my knee, the splinters in my palm, told a different story. I needed answers, I couldn't just let this go. I returned to the library, this time in broad daylight. The building looked even more decayed than I remembered. The chains on the front doors still gleamed, new and gleaming against the surrounding ruin. It was like they were waiting for me. I circled to the back, to the basement door, and pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Stale, old paper, mildew, but something else now. Something sharp and metallic. The card catalog was still there, just like I'd left it. The drawers were closed, but I knew better. I wasn't alone. I opened the drawer with my name. The card was gone. In its place was a new card, blank except for a single line. Reading room. I froze. The reading room was a place from my childhood, tucked away in the corner of the library, with long tables and dusty bookshelves. I had spent hours there reading, lost in stories, but that room had been closed off for years. It shouldn't have been accessible. I needed to see for myself. I searched the basement, finding a narrow staircase that led up. The door at the top creaked open. The reading room was bathed in a sickly yellow light, filtering through grime-covered windows. The tables were gone, replaced with rows of chairs, all of them facing a blank wall. On each chair sat a person, their bodies stiff and unmoving, eyes closed, breathing shallow. The air was thick, humid, like the room was holding its breath. I recognized some of them, neighbors, old friends, teachers from my childhood, but their faces were blank. They were empty, hollow shells of the people I had known, and the walls, they flickered. Something was projected onto the wall, a grainy, distorted video of the card catalog. The drawers opened and closed over and over, faster and faster, until the sound was deafening. The people in the chairs began to speak in unison, their voices a low murmur, overlapping and indistinguishable. They recited names, dates, events, my past, my future, as if they were reading from a book I hadn't written. I backed away, my heart racing, but the whispers followed me. They filled my ears, each one a fragment of something I wasn't supposed to understand. I ran back down the stairs and into the daylight, but the whispers didn't stop. They followed me, and they always will. Back at home, I tried to lock myself away from everything, but the whispers didn't care. They seeped through the walls, the cracks in the wood, the spaces between the floorboards. At first, it was small things. A voice on the radio that sounded like mine, repeating my name. Then it grew louder, until I couldn't tell where the whispers ended, and I began. And then the phone rang. I didn't want to answer it. I had learned better. I let it ring until the machine picked up, and when the message played, it wasn't my voice. It was me, but not. You have been selected for documentation. Your story is incomplete. Click. The line went dead. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I grabbed my keys, hoping to leave, but the car wouldn't start. The fuel tank was empty. I hadn't used that much gas, but the gauge read empty, as though someone or something had drained it. And that's when I realized I wasn't running away from the library. It was coming for me. The door slammed shut behind me as I ran back into the house. The whispers, they were already inside. Have a story of your own? If you've been gripped by this chilling tale and have a story that lingers in your mind, I want to hear it. Whether it's a personal experience, a terrifying encounter, or a tale straight from your imagination, share it with me. Submit your stories to duskynights145@gmail.com. Let's unravel the darkest stories together.